Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good afternoon everyone. Welcome to our first training course on multiculturalism. Today's topic is on inter-ethnic interaction and global citizenship education. I'm Dr. Ilhami, head of Unit of Well, EDEC, and also your MC for today's session. Today, we are very fortunate to have Associate Professor Dr. Wendy for our course facilitator. And if you have any questions, you can either unmute your mic or post your questions, in the chat area. And for your information, at the end of this session, we are going to have some photo session. So you can turn on your camera, afterwards. So let me introduce you, to Associate Professor Dr. Wendy, our course facilitator for today. Dr. Wendy is currently the director for CITRA, UM, and she's also Associate Fellow at the Center for Civilization Dialogue, UM, and International Fellow at King Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, ICIT, a world-renowned institution that trains people to pursue interfaith dialogue for peace. Her current work as a fellow in ICIT is to develop a module that integrates the elements of global citizenship education into interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Dr. Wendy Yee is very passionate in the field of youth development, and she has developed many different programs such as global citizenship, peace education, preventing and countering violent extremism to empower the youth. In her capacity as an academic, she has developed a course on Introduction to Peace and Humanity Studies. And through this course, she has trained many young students to become peace advocates and transform them to become valuable members in the society. Many of her students who have taken her course ended up working in areas related to sustainability, dedicated their free time to continue working with NGOs for humanity whom they have associated with during their course projects, continue to advocate for the less fortunate and other humanitarian related issues in their respective field upon graduation. In order to continue her pursuit for her scholarly improvement and advancement, she has taken 2 certification programs in the United Nations University, Japan, as well as in the Institutes of Peace Dialogue in Switzerland. She has brought back with her the knowledge and ideas not only to improve her teaching and learning for the students in UM through the ethnic relation course and the peace and humanity course that she started, but she also shared her ideas and knowledge with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, as well as the Department of Higher Education Malaysia, where she has been appointed as the think tank and consultant in these national ministries. She also works closely with Southeast Asia Regional Center for Counter-Terrorism, CIS, Ministry of Foreign Affairs on PFV and PVE and peace education. She has often been asked to speak at forums at the national as well as international forum, and also be interviewed by the media and speak at a TV program on area related to ethnic relations, peace, unity and youth development. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Wendy to facilitate this course. Dr. Wendy, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. Very good afternoon, everyone. Once again, thank you, Dr. Ilhami. Thank you so much for your very, very kind and generous introduction. Before I continue, I just would like to check with everyone, am I audible? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Dr. Wendy.
Yes, okay, thank you so much. So once again, a very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much, EDEC, for inviting me and for giving me this wonderful opportunity to study and to learn from all of you today. Well, probably I think I would allow me to share screen in order to start my presentation. Okay. Okay, so I hope I'm audible and as well as you're able to see my slides, yeah? So if there's any technical issues that you're facing, please feel free to let me know, yeah? So I can just stop and pause. And for this session for this afternoon, I really hope that it's going to be a very interactive session, because I know, afternoon is not a very good time, to have such a session, but I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. So please do participate and do enjoy yourself in this session. Yeah. Okay. So as have kindly introduced by Dr. Ilhami, the topic of my presentation this afternoon is on interethnic interaction and global citizenship education. So I would like to start by asking everyone, in your own opinion, what does the color on this map indicate? Could you share? Probably you can type in the chat, and you can actually. I will try to look at it. What is the color in this map? What do you think the color in this map actually represent? You know what? I'm trying to see your response in my group here, so that I can see if there's anybody typing anything. Would you like to put down? Diversity. Thank you, Ishak. Diversity. What else do you see from the map? What else do you think it may represent? I know Dr. Mala is typing something. I could see her typing. Well, probably while you guys are putting in your thoughts, yeah, I think Isha, you got it right actually. Yeah. So this map basically marks the state of ethnic diversity across different countries, right? So if you look, there's basically two colors. I mean, two big colors. Yeah, it's actually in the spectrum. So orange actually marks the countries which are ethnically less diverse, or rather they call it more homogeneous. So the darker the orange color, the more homogeneous is the country. While the green here marks ethnically more diverse countries, which are more heterogeneous, in other words. So the darker the green color, the more heterogeneous is the country. Now, just to give you some background, how these markings were actually made, right? So basically, there were 5 economists and social scientists. So they wanted to measure ethnic diversity for a paper that they were about to publish in Harvard Institute of Economic Research. So they started by comparing data from different sources, for example, from the National Census, from the Encyclopedia Britannica, from the Minority Rights Group International, and from a report from 1998, which is called the Ethnic Groups Worldwide, right? So they were looking at these reports, and they were actually comparing to determine what data set would be most reliable and most complete to explain the diversity across the globe. So because the data sources, because they were from census, they were from surveys, and most of these were actually self-reported, yeah? So meaning the ethnic group data reflects how people actually see themselves, yeah? And not how they're being categorized by others. It's basically how they see themselves. So what these researchers did was they actually gauged by asking this question. For example, if you call up 2 persons at random in a particular country, and ask them their ethnicity, what are the odds that they would give different answers, right? So the higher the odds, the more ethnically diverse would be that country. So this is how the results were collected from 650 different ethnic groups from 190 countries worldwide. So this is how these colors are being mapped. So if you look at these colors once again, there are a few trends that you can actually see right away from the map. Yeah, for example, countries in Europe and the Northeast Asia tend to be more homogeneous because it's orangey in color, whereas those countries in the sub-Saharan African nations are somewhat more diverse, more green in color, right? And of course, the other countries like America, they are somewhat in the middle. So now, although this paper that I'm showing you right here is commonly cited, and discussed, but I personally felt that there are some observations that need further discussions and analysis. For example, the first question is, who am I? The first question that people commonly ask is, what is ethnicity? And the second question is, what is the difference between race and ethnicity? Right? So I'm sure some of us, throughout our life, these questions have somewhat popped up in our minds before. Now let us do a poll. Okay, probably you can, type slido.com and then hashtag 372056. Could you please put in your thoughts on this? Personally, your personal opinion, is there any difference between race and ethnicity? Could you do that, so that we just wanted to have a general idea on what you think of race and ethnicity. Is there a difference? If it's a yes or if it's a no. Okay, because once you put in your answer, the results will actually pop up immediately. So you just go to slido.com #3720056 and then key in. Wow. Okay. So far, 1%. Anybody else? Are you keying in your answers right now? Is there a difference between race and ethnicity? 2, right? I hope more answers are coming in right now. Yeah. So looks like the trend is, everyone agrees that there is a difference between race and ethnicity. So yes, yeah. So we usually, put them together in the same group. Usually there is a difference. You are right. You're actually right in that sense. But commonly people use them interchangeably. Even in some academic context, people use them interchangeably. They are similar in nature, but however, they are actually different. Through a little bit on what is the difference between race and ethnicity. Now, race, let us start with race, right? So race is basically an arbitrary classification of humans, right? Based on the physical characteristics that we can see very obviously. For example, the color of the skin, the facial form, the shape of the eyes, or the shape of the nose, or even the hair, whether it's a straight hair or a curly hair, right? So that is basically how people categorize with such physical, biological characteristic, and put them according to different racial groups. Now, where does this word race, actually comes from? So this word race was recorded, in this form, called race, around the 15th century, right? And it is an English word which was borrowed from the French, which derived from the Italian word raza, yeah, which literally means kind, breed, and lineage. However, by the 18th century, the meaning of race began to change, right? Because starting from that time, as European colonialism and the imperialism started to spread, so the white Europeans used race to sort humans by place of origin as well as the skin color, creating a social hierarchical, a level, which served as the foundation for slavery, right? So anthropologists, physiologists, psychologists, and a lot of other writers and thinkers in the late 18th and 19th century, they also wrongly use this characteristic of a person's race, and they say, this person's race will innately determine and justify their social superiority or inferiority. So that means, even anthropologists, some thinkers, they even say that yes, based on this race, these are their innate, characteristic, hence we can actually use them to determine their social standard, whether they're superior or they're inferior, right? So for them, those race appear to be white, are incorrectly believed, the color of their skin and other aspects of their appearance meant that they were more intelligent, more capable, moral, and they're more human as compared to those who are not white. Okay, so this is how it actually evolved. So the use of race, as a classifier has always been fundamentally flawed, because you can't sort human beings just by observing a person's skin color or the shape of the nose or the shape of the eyes, or whether the hair is curly or whether they have a straight hair, right? So this unfortunately how this word or terminology race has actually been evolved. So in fact, about 100 years ago, an American sociologist, Du Bois, he raised his concern that race was being used as a biological explanation for what he understood to be social and cultural differences between different populations of people. Right? So he was very, very concerned. So he spoke out against this idea of white and black as discrete groups, claiming that these distinctions actually ignore the scope of human diversity. So even scientists today, They agree with Du Bois that race has been used as a social construct without much biological meaning today. And even in recent journal articles, scholars say racial categories are weak proxies for genetic diversity. And modern genetics research also explains race is a useful tool to elucidate human genetic diversity, but on the other hand, race is also understood to be a poorly defined marker of that diversity. For example, based on the research conducted by researchers from Germany on complete genomes of different parts of the world, the results actually shown that even between Africa and Europe, right, there is not one single absolute genetic difference. Meaning, there's no single variant where all Africans have one variant, just one variant, and all Europeans have just one. There's no such distinction, right? That means all variants were somehow interrelated. So in other words, genetic differences were not fixed along racial lines. Assumptions about genetic differences between people, people of different races is actually flawed and have obvious social and historical repercussions, and they continue to threaten and fuel racist beliefs. Now, let us do an exercise, let me do an exercise with all of you right now. Now, this activity, I know, these are the people in my office, and you can see myself here. So basically, this is me and my staff. So, so I wanted you to look at, these different pictures that I have here, and you see the A, B, C, D, E. All right, all my staff, and actually invited them here, and some of them are here today. So basically, I did this activity with my staff, during one of our training in my office. So what I want you to do now is I want you to group them. Okay, I want you to group them based on their race. Okay, so you can just group them based on the alphabet, A, B, B, C, or C, D, or D, E, or, B, E, or whatever. So group them based on the race categories that you understand. All right, so I'm going to go to the Slido again. Next slide will be Slido. So have a last look at these photos and have a last look at these alphabets. Please go into that Slido, and then you will choose your answers. And let's see, how do we categorize these 5 beautiful ladies from CITRA? Okay, so now again, join slido.com, #372056. So please put in your answers. Just in case you are trying to look at them again, just to give you the image of them once again and the alphabets. Okay, try to group them according to race. All right. Okay, can I have more answers? Any more answers coming in? Let's see. This is actually a very, very interesting exercise that my staff actually did. My staff and I, and we were so amazed with our answers actually. Okay, I see 6 people. Everybody agrees that it should be B, C, D, E, and A. Okay, let us go back a little bit. B, C, D, E, and A. Okay. Right, before I review the answers, okay, let us look at it again. Are there any more other answers coming in? Okay, now, based on your answers, B, C, D, E, and A, well, if you look at these people, you would easily group them based on their race category as we commonly understood, right? Obviously, Dr. Mala and Dr. Kanaki would be in the same group. Puan Farida and Cik Hatini will be in the same group, and obviously when Dr. Wendy will be in another group, right? However, after our discussions, we realized in terms of genetic lineage and race categorization in its truer sense, we see a different answer. Okay, let me show you the answer actually. Yes. So this is how, this is the right grouping. Okay, so this is the right grouping that indicates our common ancestor heritage and our genetic lineage, right? So we realize that this race categorization that we often use, all right, the Malay, Chinese, and Indian, does not truly reflect our ancestors' heritage. and who we truly are. So Puan Farida and myself, you see in the middle, okay, we share a common ancestors heritage. She has ancestors from the Chinese lineage. Whereas Dr. Mala and Hatini, okay, they share common ancestors heritage, that they both have ancestors from Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan heritage. Whereas Dr. Kanaki has ancestor lineage from India. So initially we were shocked, we were as shocked as you are probably, I can't see your faces right now, but we were actually very happy. We were so happy to identify this because it actually breaks down the barriers, of the very stereotypical and the very narrow race categorization that we often use, right? So what I wanted to highlight really is, this racial categorization that we commonly use in the social and political context do not accurately reflect and describe an individual. Racial categorization may be useful in a political and social context, right? To study demographics, to study population, to study census, to study racism, although with a lot of challenges, but biologically and in race relations, it is not very helpful. So what is the moral of the story here? So the moral of the story is we are not who we think we are, and our friends are not who we think they are. So there are more commonality among us than we realize. So when we start to judge, and we start to hate one another simply based on one's race is totally absurd. Because there are unseen networks of interconnection between our lives and that of others. And this is what some scientists and philosophers are trying to tell us, that we all belong to one race. That is the human race. Now let us move on to the next definition of ethnicity, right? So ethnicity, however, is generally used in reference to a person's cultural markers, not their physical appearance. So an ethnicity is a social group that shares common and distinctive culture, religion, or language. It also refers to a person's ethnic traits, background, allegiance, and association. Now, where does ethnicity come from? Now, compared to race, ethnicity is a more recent term. It was used during the late 18th century. However, the root word ethnic itself is much older, it's a much older word found in the 14th century from the Greek word ethnos, which means nation and people. So what are the markers of one's ethnicity? There are many, right? And often exist in combination actually. For example, language. So language can be an ethnic marker. So ethnicity is often tied to the language someone speaks, such as Malay, for instance, right? So thereby, it represents a shared cultural history among those who speak the same language. The second marker is nationality. It is also connected to one's ties to a specific nation, such as Malaysians. We are all Malaysians. So in this instance, a person could describe their ethnicity as Malaysian, because our experience, our tradition as Malaysians are very different from those of the Thais or the Indonesians or the Filipinos, right? And the third marker could be the religious expression. So ethnicity can also be tied to a religion, particularly when there are social commonalities and long-standing cultural practices involved, such as Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, or even Buddhism. Case of Malaysia. Malaysia has a very unique case, and I would say that Malaysia is a really good place for us to do a case study on ethnic studies. Because in the case of Malaysia, Malaysia's ethnicity have been generally categorized as Malay, Chinese, Indian, Punjabi, Kadazan, Dusun, and many more groups, right? I mean, these are the common categories that we see even when we go to government offices, when we need to fill up borang, right? These are the things that we need to fill up, right? Now, it's very important, to understand how this actually happens, okay? So simply because among those that has been categorized as Malay, for instance, right? We know, although they are not actually homogeneous. For example, if you look at this chart here, within the ethnic Malay group, we have Minang, we have Jawa, we have Bugis, we have Banjar, we have Kelantan, Melayu, and so on and so forth, right? Although they speak Malay in general, but not the same dialect. We know that, right? And they practice similar culture and traditions, though they are not exactly the same. Now, even some traditional food that they eat is different, right? and they are Muslim, but we can actually put them under the same umbrella of the Malay ethnicity or the Malay ethnic group. So the same actually goes to the Chinese and the Indian groups. So ethnically, if we look at it, this is how we are being categorized, right? So, and it is obvious that people don't put a Jawa, a Tamil, and a Hokkien together under the same umbrella because, for the same reason that which I've just explained. But we know this again is actually a very simplistic way of categorizing people for political and social reasons. Because in reality, we know this definitely does not represent who each of us truly are. We are much more diverse than these fixed categorization. Yeah. Now, for instance, now you look at this picture. There are three beautiful young Chinese girls, right? And I can tell you, they all come from three different countries. Can you tell me who comes from Malaysia, who comes from Taiwan, and who comes from Indonesia? Could you put in the chat box right now? Like for example, you can put A equals to Malaysia, or A equals to Taiwan, or A equals to Indonesia, B equals to what, C. Could you put that? Just let us have some, I just wanted to see, how you perceive, just based on how they look like, how would you perceive where they come from? So basically there are three countries, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Indonesia. Can you put something in the chat box so that I could see if you can tell almost all the same? Okay, A is Malaysian, B is Taiwan, C is Indonesia. A Malaysian, B Taiwan, C Indonesia. Like almost all of you got the Indonesian correct, somewhat. Okay. Well, I think most of you got Malaysian and Taiwanese mixed up. In fact, A is actually Taiwanese, B is Malaysian, and C is Indonesian. Like most of you got it right. Okay, let's go back. Yeah. Okay. So we see them as Chinese girls, basically, right? Because they look like Chinese. But if you really scrutinize them, based on their ancestors' lineage and their ethnicity, the language they speak, the traditions and the culture they practice, and even their religion, you will realize that you can't exactly put them in the same box, though they look pretty much the same, right? So in a nutshell, how people perceive race and ethnicity, both of their own and that of others, can be tough to measure because the perception of race and ethnicity can be influenced by many, many, many factors. So to summarize, is there a difference between race and ethnicity? The short answer is yes, but it's very complicated, So the use of these words, often overlap and are very historical and often personal. But generally speaking, the word race involves shared physical characteristics, especially the skin color, shared ancestry, historical experiences, so on and so forth. Whereas ethnicity involves shared culture or national identity, which may include language, nationality, religion, and other customs. Yeah. So just very quickly, I would like to, to throw out, to allow us to reflect and to rethink about some of these things that we often take for granted. Yeah. Now, very often people say that Japan, that is a good example, that Japan is a very homogeneous country, right? However, in the recent Olympics, if you have watched the closing ceremony, you would have seen the cultural performances put up by the different ethnic natives in Japan. Right? So at a glance, you may think that all Japanese are the same, and they all speak the same language. But it is not exactly true. Now, these photos that you're seeing here actually represents the different ethnic groups in Japan. Even today, the Japanese language differs between those living in Hokkaido, living in the main island, and those living in smaller islands such as Okinawa. Now, this map is a map of migration of people like hundreds of years ago into Japan and to other parts of the countries in Southeast Asia. Hence, from this you can see that many natives in Japan, like the Nik people, the Ainu, for example, they have strong affiliation with the Russians. Never thought of that, right? I didn't know, until pretty much recently. See, when people migrate, right, they're mixed with the different cultures and language. and hence new cultures emerge, new language emerge, and mixed marriages happen, and then we got a new generation of mixed race, right, mixed ethnicity, and these are born, and then we continue to mix and we continue to intertwine, years after years after years after years, right? So as we see today, actually majority of them are actually from the Yamato, it's called the Yamato descendants. And if you can look at the table down there, even the Yamato descendants themselves, look at their lineage. It's pretty much, not just one lineage. It's pretty much mixed as well, right? So because the Yamato Japanese constitute more than 90% of the inhabitants of Japan today, so statistically they are the majority. But we know now that Japanese is not so homogeneous after all, right? Another example I would like to share is China. Yeah. Again, as shown in the map earlier, if you remember the green and the orange map which I showed earlier, right? So China is pretty much homogeneous. People say it's quite a homogeneous country, but we know for a fact, due to the vast size of this country, it is definitely not a homogeneous country. Although majority of the population, if you can see by the red dots on this map, are considered the Han Chinese, but it is too simplistic to regard the entire Han Chinese as the same or have the same cultural heritage. Now, let us look at within the Han Chinese, right? So, which are the majority population of China that you could see, with the red patch just now. So, if you look within the Han Chinese itself, there's so much diversity even within the Han Chinese, and each of these subgroups within them speaks a different language, a different dialect, practices different culture to a certain extent, and to a certain extent, their food are different, their customs are different. Though they are similar, but they are very, distinctively unique as well, right? And I'm just talking about the Han. I haven't even talked about the other, groups in China. So, in actual fact, this is how diverse or how heterogeneous China actually is. So therefore, the categorization of race and ethnicity that we commonly find in national census or data are sometimes too simplistic, to describe the population of a nation. And to me, I think they are overly simplistic to describe an individual. What's important is, we do not limit our understanding of one another based on these national categorization. We need to go beyond that, right? So therefore, the definition of a person's ethnicity remains very subjective. Sometimes, people categorize ethnic groups based on nationality for national interests, right? And at other times, it is based on perceptions, which are often influenced by any other factors, a lot of other factors such as colonialism, such as economy, they want to align themselves for certain reasons, for certain economical reasons, for political reasons, identity, social status, demographic status, and so on and so forth. So the question is, the question is, are we truly who we perceive we are? Am I asking a very complicated question? So the question is, are we truly who we perceive we are? So now I would like you to watch a short video clip. This is a very interesting video, and I really hope that all of you will enjoy it, because this short video will actually allow us to see how people define and perceive their ethnicity versus who they truly are. Okay, let us go back. Let me know if you can't hear the sound, all right?
I'm proud to be English. My family have served and we've defended this country and we've been to war for this country.
I'm really patriotic about Bangladesh.
Well, I am 100% Icelandic, yeah, definitely.
This is a Kurdish wedding with my mom in the traditional Kurdish clothes.
We're just proud black, so that's it.
Yeah, I think we are probably the best country in the world, if I'm honest.
Think about other countries and other nationalities in the world. Are there any that you don't feel you get on with well, or you won't like particularly?
Germany. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Germans.
You might think they're a little bit...
Particularly India and Pakistan, probably, because of the whole, the conflict.
Because I have this side of me that hates Turkish people. Not people, but the government.
But French?
No. We're just the best, it's just fact.
I'm more important than you. I don't know you, but in my opinion, I am strong, and I am more important than a lot of people.
How would you feel about taking a journey based on your DNA?
Yeah, I feel very intrigued.
What could you possibly tell me that I don't know?
So do you know how DNA works? So you get half from mum and half from dad, so 50% from each of them, and they get 50% from their parents, and back and back and back. And all those little bits of your ancestor, they filter down to make you, you. I need you to spit in this tube for me. You spit up to the little black line.
That's a lot of spit.
Right, the story of you is in that tube. What's it going to tell me?
It's going to be, oh yeah, you're French, and wait, your grandparents are French, and wait.
100% Bengali.
Solid Iraqi.
I'm Cuban.
You're going to tell me that I'm English, like I've told you.
Jay, you come down and join us?
I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say.
So you ready to find out your results? Will you read it out to us, please?
Wow, look at me. Oh my God. Oh, wow. Shit, I didn't expect that.
All of them.
Whoa! No.
Caucasus, which was Turkish?
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece.
I'm 32% British.
What?
Great Britain, 30%. Can we 5% German?
I'm Irish.
Yeah.
So I'm a Muslim Jew.
Great Britain, 11%. Are you sure these results are mine?
Eastern Europe?
Iceland has definitely moved closer to Europe now.
I'm going to go a bit far right now, but this should be compulsory. There would be no such thing as like extremism in the world if people knew their heritage like that. Like, who would be stupid enough to think of such thing as like a pure race?
In a way, we're all kind of cousins, in a broad sense. In a much more direct sense, you have a cousin in this room. Turn around and guess who it is. Waj,
Yeah. What's that?
why don't you come down here and meet your cousin?
God, this is nervous.
Did you know that?
I didn't know I did. This is like, my heart's pounding right now, I swear to God. We met.
Jay from everywhere by the reason of this.
I'm a real man of the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
So would you like to travel to all of these places?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so do you think we should do a DNA test as well? Probably we may find some cousins in this room as well, right? So, yeah, a lot of times our perceptions of who we are and who others are and how we feel about others are influenced by many factors, as mentioned before, without us realizing that we continue to live with that somewhat or somehow, distorted perception of others and ourselves. And worse still, the worst scenario is we continue to rely on the distorted perceptions of who we are and who others are, and learn to hate each other based on such superficial perceptions. From the video that we just watched just now, you see that guy, he was rather, say, I hate Germans, but he has, like 5% of German himself, right? So we never know, and this is how interconnected and intertwined our lives are with one another. So a good example, another good example about how important it is for us to really have this correct perspective and not the distorted perspective, of understanding and in our inter-ethnic interaction. I would like to give an example of, again, Malaysia, our own country, the colonial influence, in our perception of ethnicity in Malaysia. We know during the British administration, they have categorized the people simply based on the name of the country they come from, right? Without taking into consideration the language differences or the cultural differences that exist within this group. So like I've mentioned earlier, the local Malays, they categorize them as Malay, right? Even though we know that they are not homogeneous. We have Banjar, Jawa, Bugis, Rawa, and all the different subgroups, but the British categorize them as Malay because they live on this land, and perhaps they're coming around from this Malay archipelago region, so they are being categorized as Malay, right? Despite the differences that actually exist. And similarly, they categorize all the Chinese that came from China, or the ones that they brought in from China, as Chinese, without recognizing that they are different, in the sense that some of them are Hakka, they are Teochew, they are Hokkien, they are Cantonese, and based on the different provinces they come from in China. And similarly, they categorize the people whom they brought in from India, or the Indians in the country, as Indian, right? Simply because they came from India, without recognizing that they could be Tamil, they could be Malayalam, they could be Telugu, they could be different. So the problem is, although the British have left us right now, these ethnic categorization that they have created are still stuck with us, right? And well, they are not entirely wrong, to have those categorization, but it becomes problematic, when people fix our understanding of one another based on this limited perspective and starts to label one another based on these categories. That is where it becomes problematic. Right? So, and we are still using such categorization officially today to run our race-based politics, right? So that is where it becomes problematic. So therefore, it is so important for us to understand all these dynamics of race and ethnicity, and how does it help, to build better relationships and a more harmonious and peaceful societies. It is so important for us to understand this. So how do we do that? Okay, why is it so important? Why is it important? Now, firstly, we need to realize that when we start categorizing a society as homogeneous, or maybe heterogeneous, and fixing our minds, thinking that we can put people into distinct boxes, such as in the case of Malaysia, we can put people into the box of Malay, we can put people in the box of Chinese, we can put people in the box of Indians, and worse still, we have this Dan Lai Lai, which is to be, is something very, very bad to do. So in all my ethnic classes, I told my students there's no such race as Dan Lai Lai. So please, identify them as who they are, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, when we start putting people into such distinct boxes, we are running into a great danger of stereotyping people simply based on such distinct boxes and reducing each individual to a very narrowly defined category. Okay? And we have disregarded the uniqueness of each individual, and we are blinded to the fact that each individual is actually uniquely different, right? For example, not every guy with a tattoo is a bad guy, and not all African faces are drug dealers, and not all Chinese are greedy, though these are the often labels that we hear. So we need to realize why each of us, are given a different name when we were born. Even if we are born twins, we are given a different name. Or even though we belong to the same family with our siblings, each of us have different fingerprints. So what I'm trying to say here is we are all uniquely different, though with lots of similarity. So we can't just put people into boxes and start stereotyping everyone simply based on those simplistic race and ethnic categorization created by our colonial masters. And also, when we start categorizing a society as homogeneous and fixing our minds thinking that all the people in that particular country are the same, we have actually neglected the fact that besides the ancestral factors, there are many, many other factors that define a single individual. Now, let me give another example. For example, Ali and Ahmad, a fictitious name. Probably they are both Javanese Malay, but they are not the same, though they are both Javanese Malay, due to other social factors, such as their immediate environment that they've grown up, or their different family values and their upbringing, or probably a different educational background, their peers are different, their occupation are different, and etc. And if you look in a more extended perspective, if Ali is 50 years old and Ahmad is 18 years old, there are even greater differences between the both of them due to the chronological factor, such as generation differences, right? If you look at how our children behave and how they perceive the world today, it's so much different from our generation and even more different than our parents' generation. And I'm sure you remember, some of us are parents here, very often as parents, including myself, we will scold our child and tell them, don't behave like that, during my time, we were not like this and like that, and then our children will start saying, don't compare me with your time, we are living in different times, right? These are very common, So my point is, it will be too foolish of us, to stereotype, because in reality, the categories of race and ethnicities are social constructs. So what an individual is made up of is actually more complex than we can imagine. And we have more interconnection with one another than we actually realize it. So who the person is more fluid than the fixed boxes the society has created for us, or we have created for ourselves, right? Because each one of us becomes with our unique story of who we are. Now, I would like to play another video here, but perhaps I would like Umu to help me to play this video, because this video is actually adapted in a foreign language. So Umu will have to help me to play so that you could see the subtitles of this video.
Can you see the video now?
Yes, we can, Umu.
All right. Can you hold on for a while?
Yeah, sure. So as we are waiting for Umu to prepare for this video, now basically what I want to indicate from this video is, a lot of times, we don't know much about others. And because we do not know much about others, we don't see how they are related to our lives, and whether others matters to us or not, right? Now, I would like to give you a scenario before Umu start playing the video, is try to imagine what happened if we realize the stranger, a total stranger that sits across our table or sit across the bench, actually has a connection with us, with our existence and our life. They have something to do with us. How would you react to them? Would it change our stereotypical perception of them? Would it help to break down walls built based on ignorance, race, and ethnicity? Now let us watch the video and think about that. Umu, over to you.
All right. Can you let me try again?
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Umu. Thank you so much for that. Even more likely to divide along ethnic fractions, and people start to blame one another for their misfortune and their sufferings. And because it is always easier to blame others, it's always easier than to reflect on oneself, on what is actually happening. The Rwanda ethnic genocide is another example. So until and unless we put a stop to this craziness, the world will know no peace and people will continue to suffer. So what can we do? Now that we've understood these dynamics of ethnicity and inter-ethnic relations, now let's look at the tools we can use to transform such adversities to create better inter-ethnic relations vis-a-vis intercultural relations across diversity. Firstly, whenever we are confronted with a challenge of inter-ethnic or intercultural problems, we must ask ourselves, what is the root of the problem? Is it an economic problem? Or is it a political problem? Or is it a social class problem? Or is it about power and position? Or is it an individual problem? Or is it just, a misunderstanding? So now let us do a poll again, to see ourselves, and do we often analyze a problem critically before making judgment? Okay, this is about ourselves, all right? So do we often do that? We analyze before making judgment, or do we sometimes, or do we never? We just, jump on the bandwagon and just say yes, 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 and then we continue to share, whatever we are seeing. So could you please once again go to slido.com, #372056, and put in your answers and just, a quick reflection on ourselves. What do we do when we see a problem on the media or when we hear stuff? Okay. Any more coming in? Sometimes, all right. Any more coming in? So based on here, we have half of you often, yes, which is very good, which is very good, that you often analyze a problem, before making a judgment, which is very critical. And of course, some yes. I'm glad that, nobody actually put never, but don't worry if you have that never, so you can always put that, right? So yeah, so it's important. It is very, very important for us to do that as often as possible. Yeah, I'm glad to see, often comes very loudly here, as the majority of you do that. That's great, right? So now I would like to quote the words from Dr. Daisaku Ikeda. In one of the documentary he created, entitled "Another Way of Seeing Things." Right. By the way, Dr. Daisaku Ikeda is actually the United Nations Peace Award recipient, and also the NCHR Peace Award recipient. Yeah. So in one of the documentary that he made called "Another Way of Seeing Things," he highlighted that it is important. Okay, when we talk about thinking critically before we jump into a conclusion, so he said it is important to ask ourselves some very important questions as we reflect critically and ask ourselves these questions. For example, do we accept without questioning the images shown to me? Sorry, do I accept without questioning the images shown to me? Whatever we are seeing on the social media. Do I believe unconfirmed reports without first examining them? Have I unwittingly allowed myself to become prejudiced? Do I really have a grasp of the facts of the matter? Have I confirmed these things for myself? Have I gone to the scene and checked it out? Have I met the people involved, or am I just listening and hearing what other people are saying? Have I listened to what these people have to say? Am I swayed by malicious rumors? So these questions are important for us, not to simply pass stereotypical judgment and hatred to others based on very superficial assumptions, right? So I believe such reflective inner dialogue is actually very, very important. If we do not engage in reflective inner dialogue, we will easily become the victim of our own biasness, and we will run into a danger of being a perpetuator of such biases in the vicious cycle in our own family, our own community, and our own society. And when there are more and more of such vicious cycles created in the society, everyone in that vicious cycle, including ourselves, will be guilty and responsible to the eventful violence and conflict that may eventually happen in the future. Hence, it is therefore important to realize that we need to break that vicious cycle. And to break that vicious cycle, it all starts from an individual. It all starts from us. So when an individual decides to stop perpetuating biases, and prejudices against one another, whatever we hear from our friends, even our family members saying that, we have to put a stop to that. Then only that vicious cycle will stop. And when more individuals in their respective communities and societies put a stop to those vicious cycles, starting from themselves, they are the disconnected in that circuit, the whole society will eventually be transformed. Right? So just like a tiny stone, when you throw a tiny stone, even though it's very tiny, into an ocean, though it will still create that ripple effect, right? So now I would like to show you another very interesting video that reflects on how the change of an individual can bring about so much happiness around him. Okay? I'm not sure. Let me know whether you can hear the sound. I can't remember whether I clicked the sound button just now when I share the screen again.
This is our one.
Hey!
You Buddha huh? I don't care. You have to pay for my car. What's your number? How can you drive?
Ah Wong is not a happy man.
Tissue. No. He's not really blind one. Boss. What's wrong, boss? Hey. Lobo, faster go inside.
And no one ever escapes his judgmental eye.
I sent you to school for what? To fail? Go study. Dinner late again. What kind of wife?
Yes, Ah Wong has issues. And he's never happy because he only sees things his way.
Kejadian yang aneh di seluruh kawasan lembah.
But one day, something strange happened. You'll never believe it. Ah Wong gets a visit from his younger self.
I know you. I know you did this. Whatever you want, I'm not interested. So, go away.
Not until I show you something.
Now, you're going to show me a...
Just watch. You see this uncle? He lost his wife the night before.
How I know? He never tell me.
And this uncle,
It's not really my one.
he never sell tissues for himself only.
Waalaikumsalam.
Him, that day is his daughter's birthday. Now it's over. And our boy, what he's going through, you had no idea. And the love of your life.
Dinner late again. What kind of wife? Enough.
One more video, please.
Why are you reminding me of this? Why?
Because we can be happy. And that can only happen when you reach out to others. Trust me.
Boy?
Huh? Yes, Pa.
What are you doing?
I'm watching anime.
Can I see?
Sure.
Do you know, I'm also manga fan when I young.
Really?
Yeah.
You? Manga?
Uh-huh.
Ah, look at that. Ah Wong is actually smiling. All it took was a little step to reach out to others. So we've come to the end of this story with a message to share. And it's this: we're never truly free until we are free from our own judgment. And that can only happen when we open our hearts to those around us.
Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed that video. So it is true, we are never free until we are free from judging others. Indeed, we won't be free until we let go of our stereotypes and learn how to know and learn about others better in a more profound manner. And until we reach out to others, right? So it is true and it is so important that we really, really need to free ourselves from biases and hatred in order to bring forth happiness. Now, it is important for us to realize that all of us are indeed global citizens, right? whether we recognize it or not. Because we are all living in this very increasingly, interconnected world, and global challenges impact national and local issues and vice versa. And it concerns all of us. And all the things that I've been discussing so far, it has a lot to do with the importance of being a global citizen. So therefore, global citizenship education is important because we need to recognize that we are actually global citizens, right? And we need to know how to behave as one. Now, according to UNESCO, there are 3 domains of learning for global citizenship education, which is the connective, socio-emotional, and behavioral. Now, corresponding to the 3 domains of learning, Dr. Daisaku Ikeda, which I've just introduced earlier, a peace philosopher and also the recipient of the United Nations Peace Medal and Humanitarian Award, have also given 3 practical essential elements of a global citizen. There are wisdom, courage, and compassion. Now, this is because it is important to understand that global citizenship is not determined merely by the number of languages one speaks, right? Or the number of countries a person has traveled. So a global citizen can just be an ordinary citizen, who have not even stepped, out of his own country, right? But important is this person possesses this inner nobility and who have, and they are a genuine concern for the peace and prosperity of the world. Now, allow me to further explain these 3 essential elements of a global citizen, which we can all apply in ourselves and as well as for our students. Firstly, is the wisdom. The wisdom to perceive, having this wisdom to perceive the interconnectedness of all life and living. And we talk about this a lot just now, how we are somewhat interconnected, right? But it's just that we didn't realize that. So this pandemic, we all live in the pandemic right now, have actually forced us to realize this interconnectedness. We know for a fact that the only way for us to win over this pandemic is when everyone is vaccinated, and for us to be safe, we need to achieve herd immunity. And our life and our survival is very much dependent on the life and survival of others as well. So in other words, no one is safe until everyone is safe. So having this realization that our lives are indeed interconnected and becoming more appreciative as a result is the very first step to break down the walls between people and to embrace each other for who we are. So this is actually a very important point, because when we fail to see this interconnectedness of all lives, we will live in a very egoistic bubble. Because everything we do, just like our Wong just now, as we can see, because everything we do is all about me, I, and myself. And hence we lack empathy, we lack compassion, and we become self-centered, ethnocentric, and arrogant, thinking that we are always more superior than others. Now, the second essential element as a global citizen, it is important to have courage, not to fear and not to deny differences, but to respect and strive to understand people of different cultures and grow from encounters with them. Again, this pandemic, this virus, it did not discriminate us based on our superficial differences. It did not discriminate us based on our race or ethnicity or religion, right? So therefore, our superficial differences are not a cause for division. The true cause of division is the lack of courage to embrace and respect our differences. So when one lacks the courage to embrace diversity as a strength, we will never be able to respect others. When we don't respect others, chances is we will start to stereotype others who are different, and we have prejudice, and our prejudice will continue to grow in our hearts, and eventually our actions will be filled with discrimination, distrust, envy, jealousy, and hatred. So there's a famous saying that goes, it is much more valuable looking for the strength in others, because we gain nothing by criticizing their imperfections. Now, the final condition of a global citizen is compassion. We need to have compassion to maintain an imaginative empathy that reaches beyond our immediate surrounding. And we must be able to have this empathy to extend to those suffering in distant places. Again, I would like to quote this pandemic, right? So during this pandemic, we can see our Malaysians, we were able to empathize with the sufferings of others. Many NGOs and individuals have distributed food and donated basic medical needs to the hospital. And we even saw the White Flag campaign, And people are bringing food to those, houses with those white flags. They brought food to those places voluntarily. So in other words, it is only when we're able to put ourselves in other people's shoes and try to understand from their perspective, we will be able to empathize with the problems and challenges that other people are facing. Because without empathy, our world will be cold and heartless. That's when humanity will all turn into machines where we have no feelings or concern about one another. Now let me share with you a very interesting story about the farmer, who planted sweet corn, right? So there was once a farmer who grew an award-winning sweet corn. And each year, he will bring his corn to enter a competition, which is a statewide competition. And each year, he will win the competition for producing the best corn. One year, a newspaper reporter decided to interview him to learn how he grew his corn. And the reporter discovered something unbelievable. The farmer shared his corn seed. When you plant the corn, you need to plant with the seed first, right? So he shared his corn seed with his neighbors. And the reporter was shocked. And the reporter asked him, how can you afford to share your best seed with your neighbors when they are entering the same competition as you each year? So the farmer looked at the reporter and he asked, why? Why, sir? He said, didn't you know? The wind picks up pollen from the ripening corn and swirls it from field to field. So if my neighbors grow inferior corn, cross-pollination will steadily degrade the quality of my corn. So if I want to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors to grow good corn too. So this story informs us that this farmer is very much aware of the interconnectedness of life. Although he may be an ordinary poor farmer, but he definitely demonstrates the wisdom, the courage, and the compassion of a global citizen. He realized his corn cannot improve unless his neighbor's corns also improve. And the lesson for us, for each of us, is if you want to live a good life, we must also help our neighbors become happy as well. The fact is, none of us truly wins until we all win. So let us nurture this wisdom, this courage and compassion and empathy as a global citizen. Because discrimination, hatred, prejudice are nurtured. They are not nature. So therefore, we can change them around. Time that we wake up from our own foolishness, thinking that through war, through conflict, through violence, through death, fights, discrimination, and through passing hatred on each other to our next generation, we'll make the world a better place. People will live in peace and harmony. We have to stop that foolishness because we cannot go on like that. We cannot go on perpetuating a sick and toxic environment. It will not only cause sickness to our body physically, it will also cause sickness in our minds. It will intoxicate us mentally, emotionally, and physically. Through reflective inner dialogue and basing ourselves on the framework of global citizenship of wisdom, courage, and compassion, we need to develop our intercultural competence, transforming ourselves to become a true global citizen, which will lead to transforming our society. So in order to aspire, or in order to acquire intercultural competence, we need to acquire knowledge. From knowledge, we transform our attitude, and finally, we develop the skills, the behavior to act appropriately that will bring about the change we hope to achieve. So therefore, learning about the different culture, the different belief systems, the different values, the different worldviews, the different experiences to create awareness of diversity in classes and lectures are essential. Now, as you can see here, the second picture shows very clearly two men looking at a digit from different ends. One sees a 6 and the other sees a 9. And the caption tries to get us to see that there are 2 points of view that just are equally valid. Just because you're right, that doesn't mean I'm wrong. It's just that we haven't seen from my side. Now, this is very common, and it is true, especially when we live in a country with diverse cultures, with different background, different, family brought up, and different experiences. So very often, such differences informs our perspective, our value, our attitude, and our behavior. So therefore, unless we realize there is another way of seeing things from the lens of a different culture, intercultural interaction can be a great challenge. So this is why developing such knowledge and having the courage not to fear differences but trying to see from another lens will make us a better person. Now the third diagram shows what produces hatred in a society, especially in a multicultural society, is actually ignorance and fear, right? Now ignorant about how our lives are linked to each other. We are ignorant that our lives are interconnected. We are ignorant that everyone have a unique and beautiful story to tell. We are ignorant that the pain and sufferings we experience is the same as others. We are ignorant that our lives are so much interdependent. We are ignorant that we share more concerns and similarities than we know. So all this ignorance can easily be manipulated with fear-mongering tactics, such as using narratives that amplify threats and create enemies and hatred based on differences. So such narratives ride on the ignorance and fear of the people, making unlawful actions. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, people use narratives, because people are ignorant, so they ride on such ignorance and they create a lot of narratives which create more fear in people. And when they do that, even unlawful actions will seem acceptable. Even unlawful actions may sound legitimate, right? So with ignorance and fear, stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, and hatred are reinforced in the name of threat, reinforced in the name of nationalism, reinforced in the name of patriotism, and even terrorism at times, thus creating more hatred between one another, right? So having knowledge to counter ignorance is crucial. However, we know it is not sufficient, because we know it is also very important to develop the right attitude and skill to live harmoniously with one another. So having this knowledge to counteract ignorance is important, and we need to have that attitude, right, that effective, the emotion and skill and behavior. So again, how do we do that? Now, according to a very famous sociologist, we call him Kai Haikaren, in 2009, he said the acquisition of knowledge is called the monological approach, or knowledge acquisition metaphor. Now, in this approach, knowledge is shared one way, from the teacher to the learner, and it occurs within the mind of the learner. However, he said this is not enough, right? So in order to develop the attitude and skill, which I mentioned just now, which is equally important, we need a dialogical approach, or we call it a participation metaphor is required. Now, in this participation metaphor, or in this dialogical approach, knowledge sharing is a two-way process between the lecturer and the learner, as well as between the learner and the learner, right? Through reflection, through communication, through collaboration, where both parties are learning from each other's experiences. And as they share experiences and ideas, right, in this dialogical approach, in a very safe space, then people will get to develop that empathy, that understanding, that attitude and behavior. And through such dialogical process, students learn to dialogue patiently, right? They learn to listen empathetically, they learn to observe, and they learn to view things from other people's perspective. So as a result of this dialogical process, the participants learn to develop their own effective and the right attitude and the behavior towards each other. So this process is actually very powerful to help our learners to eradicate ethnocentrism, and to develop respect, openness, and to develop deeper awareness of each other, thus building stronger bonds and relationship. So with that, with such approach, we are able to draw forth the humanity inherent in all individual. Now, let me share with you two examples of this dialogical approach that I use in my class. Okay, and for this, I also, perhaps you can actually turn on your mic, and I would like to hear some response from you, right? Now, so the first example that I would like to share with you, which I use in my class, is the story of nasi lemak, right? So very quickly, maybe some of you can turn on your mic. What do you see? Tell me, what do you see on the plate of nasi lemak? Anybody?
Sambal.
Ayam goreng.
I heard sambal. Delicious. I heard ayam goreng. What else?
Peanut.
Peanuts. Yes. Anybody else?
Mixture of Malay and Indian
Food?
Yes. Yes, that's true. Nasi, yes, ikan bilis, we see cucumber, we see telur, we see the plate and everything, right? So I used to ask this question to my students in class, so they will tell me all the very obvious things they see on the plate. But what I'm trying to tell them is, I actually ask them further. I say, yes, you see the ayam goreng, but where did this ayam goreng come from? It perhaps come from, a Malay guy who actually, reared his chicken in one of the farm all the way up in Kedah. Okay, so he reared the chicken, he sembelih the chicken, or probably he did not. Okay, he reared the chicken, right? And then probably another Bangladeshi guy, which is a lorry driver, drove this kitchen to a factory, to a kilang. Okay, where the chicken is being sembelih, where the chicken is being packed, being washed and being packed, and then maybe another Chinese guy, would drive another van, to bring this chicken, which is being, cleaned up and everything, bring from that factory in Kedah all the way to Kuala Lumpur, right? And when this Chinese guy put this chicken in one of these, in this shop, now who arranged this, who bought this chicken, and who cooked the chicken? It could be a makcik, who fried the chicken, right? And this is just a story about chicken. I haven't even talked about the story of the peanut, or even the eggs, or the sambal, or the nasi. Where did this nasi come from? It come from, again, some Thai, perhaps it's a Thai rice, so it's some Thai farmers right up north. And who transported those those paddy to a factory, and who processes it, who pack it, and who drove it to another factory, who drove it to another shop, who drove it to the kedai renci, and who bought it and who cooked it. So what I'm trying to say here is, from a very simple plate of nasi lemak, there are many, many, many people involved, in preparing this nasi lemak for all of us to enjoy. So what I'm trying to say here is, do we have this wisdom to be able to see this fabric, this network of interconnectedness among all of us, right? So this story actually allows us, to have this courage to appreciate the different strength, of the different people in their own unique ways, and their own respected profession and job, which help to contribute to this wonderful nasi lemak that we are eating. We just wall up the whole plate in less than 5 minutes. But do we appreciate the people involved? It is just not that seller who sells it to you, but before the seller can sell it to you, there's so many people behind the scene involved in preparing this nasi lemak, right? So that is the moral of the story, which is so important, that we often take things for granted, So we need to be able to see that. So, and this is only one meal. I haven't even talked about other meals, and this is only about the story of nasi lemak. I haven't even talked about the story of how our handphones are made. I haven't even talked about how our clothes, the clothes that we wear, how they are made, and who was involved in the whole process, in the whole production process of it, right? So when I use this dialogical approach to allow my students to reflect, to create this awareness and understanding, to help them to develop this wisdom, to understand the interconnectedness of life, to learn to be grateful, to learn to have empathy and appreciation. So, and to allow students to realize that our life exists, within this invisible network, and we are who we are because there are other people involved. Without them, there is no us. So trying to create such impact, to develop their affective, their attitude, is very, very important to bring about the change, right? Now, I would like to share with you another example, which I use in my class. You can see a lot of pictures here. Basically, these are all illustrations illustrated by a youth from Sabah, and these illustrations are basically based on stories that my students prepared in class. So what happened is, in my class, I actually asked my students to write stories about them, about their experiences in their 19 years of life. Have they had one experience which is unforgettable, one experience where they were being helped, they were being supported, whether directly or indirectly, or their family, by someone of a different ethnic group, right? Something that have really created that impact in their lives. So I asked them to think about that for a moment, in their 19 years of life, and I asked them to write that reflection. And at the end of the class, everybody came up and presented their stories. And indeed, right, so there were so many moving stories that they narrated, and each story that they narrated actually a lot of students in class, they actually cried. And what I did was, these stories that they've all narrated, like I said, I engaged an illustrator to illustrate them, into this picture, which we are looking into, publishing it later. I mean, the whole idea is, is from the student themselves, edited by youth, illustrated by youth, and we just want to put more of these positive narrative out there, because this is the true reflection of Malaysian. This is the true stories, that how we are related to each other. But these positive narratives were never narrated, it's never made headlines in the newspaper, right? So just very quickly share with you what you see here. So there's this the teacher in the center. So obviously is a teacher of a different ethnic compared to the student, and the student narrated that her life was transformed because of one teacher, because of this teacher. Although it's of a different ethnic group, but that teacher really impacted her. And you can see on the far left-hand corner, there's this Malay girl and this Chinese friend. They were walking, they were going to a kedai runcit, and this Malay friend was trying to buy something, but it was her friend who actually helped her to check whether that food that she wanted to buy, whether it's halal or not, because I think they were actually traveling to some foreign countries, so it was very, very hard to actually find the halal symbol. So the friend was very, very conscious about that, helping her to check. And on the bottom there, you can see a few boys, so this student of mine, he was sharing his experience after school, how they always hang out together, how they will share, the good times and the bad times together. And that, that friendship, this friendship that he has remained until today. And on the far end, on the far right hand corner top, you can see this Malay girl. She was crying because she related when she was very young. Her parents were supposed to come and pick her up after school in an evening. She had an evening class. But they didn't come, they came very, very late actually. So it started to get dark. And she was very, very scared because she was the only one waiting in front of the school because the school gate was closed. So she was sitting at the bus stop alone, right? But across the road, there's this Indian lady, there's this Indian makcik who was operating a little store, saw her, and this Indian lady actually came over to her, and sit with her and, gave her handphone and help her to call her parents, and sat with her throughout until the parents arrived. So that is really one moment that this girl, this student of mine, she could never forget, and she was really grateful to that auntie because she was really, really scared at that time. And the last picture at the bottom, you can see this student narrated that one day suddenly the grandmother suddenly had a stroke at home, and she was alone with the grandmother and she didn't know what to do, and it was actually her neighbors who came to the rescue, and this neighbor is actually of a different ethnic group, right? So, and there are a lot more of such wonderful stories that my students were relating in their classes. So these are some examples of how this dialogical approach can actually help to bring forth this wonderful experiences that our students actually have, but it has always been in their subconscious mind. It has very seldom, been brought forth to the mainstream. So how do we allow these experiences to be mainstream, rather than all those, negative stereotypes to be the mainstream, because that's not who we are. So these are some examples of how we could actually do that, and I think it is very, very important. Yeah. So wait, hang on, let me check if I missed anything else I wanted to share. Yeah, okay, so probably not. That's all I wanted to share about my approach that I use in my with my students. So now I will also, another one that I would like all of you to participate very, very quickly is, do tell me, you can turn on your mic and do tell me, what do you see first? Okay?
Red.
Red, right? Anybody else? What do you see first?
Green.
Okay. What else? Anybody else?
The leathery black background.
Ooh, that's impressive. What else? Anybody else?
Warna yang berlainan.
Warna yang berlainan. Okay, what else? Anybody else? Did anybody of you see that there's 3 squares? There's
Yes.
right? Yeah. So, but what caught our attention first usually are the different colors, right? And so what I'm trying to say here, if you see the different color first, right, like green, blue, red, right, it means that we have a preference for looking for differences before we see similarities. I mean, they all have the same box. I mean, same box as in, same square, but we somewhat, didn't realize that we see that, but we didn't see that actually, right? So, however, if we see the similar shapes first, maybe some of you did, right? Before noticing the different colors, it means that you have a preference for identifying similarities before noticing the differences, right? So therefore, in intercultural competence, it's all about having this ability to see things from different perspectives. So, and somebody said the leathery background, and that's really interesting, right? So it is important, to learn to see the different variety of perspective, even some of these perspectives that we strongly disagree with, right? So it is also about, bridging different values. How do we bridge the differences, the different values, the different norms, and the different preferences? So we can do that actually by focusing on what the parties have in common, what everyone have in common, and use this commonality to bridge the differences. So in our case, what is our commonality across our differences? It is our humanity. The preciousness, the uniqueness of each human life that needs to be respected. I think each and every one of us, our life deserves to be respected. Each and every one of us, without doubt, right? So that is the commonality. So humanity actually, has this capacity to create good values, and we need to nurture that capacity so that we can all coexist and live harmoniously. Now, let me show you another short story, another video on what happens when humanity manifests this capacity to create good values, embrace diversity, and what happens when we focus on the strength of each other, and what happens when we work together to coexist in harmony. Okay, let's watch the video.
Ako, kinukunyo ang sige nasi mama
你教我吗？来过，来吃几包。这nasi lemak special.
Selamat Hari Raya.
Uncle Kayu. Saya nak beli kayu.
Leha, lu nak buat apa dengan kayu ini ya?
Bakar.
Bakar?
Nak ikut cepatlah.
Pakcik, nasi lemak satu? Cik, kurang satu.
Kurang satu. Nah. Nasi lemak dah habis.
Habis?
Uncle.
Kenapa jual sikit sangat?
Tak boleh masak lebih lah. Dapur kita kecil. Bukan luas macam kedai uncle.
Boleh loh.
Uncle Kayu.
Uncle Kayu, 新年快乐，恭喜发财。
恭喜发财。
Okay, so with that video, it's true, yeah, it's important how we work together. It is only when we work together, then we'll be able to bring out the best, in each and every one of us. Yeah, so that the videos that I've showed you, I love them so much that I actually use them, over and over again in all my classes, because I felt that there's so much stories to tell, in those videos. I mean, those are just wonderful. And how this, this DG, DCIMB, they could come up with such video is just amazing. So finally, yeah, what's truly important that we have talked about so many things this afternoon is we need to engage in dialogue. Okay, so that is also another very important element, because it is only through dialogue that we can transcend, the divides imposed by different cultures, the divide imposed by different ethnicity, nationalities, and religious creed, to conjoin our inherent goodness with the boundless potential found within all of us, and to expand the bonds of solidarity. Because it is not our differences that divide us, it is our inability to recognize, to accept, to celebrate and manage those differences. That is the issue. And cultural differences should not separate each one of us, but rather cultural diversity brings a collective strength that can benefit all of humanity. So since we have just celebrated our 64th independence yesterday, yeah, you can see my background is very semangat now. So I would like to share a last video. To me, I think this is a very beautiful 2-minute video, short video, but it actually features the true spirit of Merdeka, and something that we Malaysians do have, and we will continue to have, and let us not forget that. All right?
2021. Much of our world feels like it's falling apart. People are losing sight of hope, purpose, and worse yet, a future. Then again, in extraordinary times, it was always ordinary Malaysians who rose to inspire. People like Dr. William Teh, a Malayan physician. In a battle with a mysterious plague in China, he invented the mask, which evolved into today's N95 respirator. In World War II, Sibyl Katigasu, a nurse, was tortured by the Japanese for helping the Malayan resistance fighters. But she never gave up serving and saving lives. As Major Wong and Sergeant Ardenan fought communist insurgents, their platoon was gravely wounded. But Major Wong refused to leave Sergeant Ardenan and his men behind until they made it back safely. Compassion, selflessness, ingenuity. This spirit, which started in the days of Malaya, still lives on today in Malaysia. Through the years, we have given this spirit many names, but its heart and soul remains. It is a light that shines brighter in extraordinary times. The belief that it is not only those in power who can make a difference, but the humanity within every one of us. To all the Rakyat heroes back then, today, and to come, together, let us continue to inspire Malaysia for good.
Yes. There's a few phrases in the video that I really love so much. It says, in the most difficult times, it is the ordinary people who rose to inspire. Compassion, selflessness, ingenuity is all in us as Malaysians. And it is not only the people in power who can make a difference. It is our humanity every one of us, as ordinary as who we are, we can all make a difference. In the past, in the present, and definitely in the future. So this is something that we need to be reminded again and again, that all of us are great individuals as Malaysians. So to conclude, I would like to reiterate the main points that I have shared today. Firstly, the categorization of race and ethnicity that we commonly find in national census or data are too simplistic to describe an individual. Genetic differences were not fixed along racial lines. Assumptions about genetic differences between people of different races is flawed and have obvious social and historical repercussions, and they continue to threaten and fuel racist beliefs. Our perceptions of who we are and who others are influenced by many other factors, including economic, socio-political, and colonialism. Secondly, we have to realize the uniqueness, the complexity, and the fluidity of each individual. So therefore, we cannot stereotype people simply based on distinct boxes or categorization. We also need to realize that our lives are interconnected with one another and very much dependent on one another. Therefore, a sense of appreciation towards each other is crucial. Thirdly, our continuous perpetuation of negative stereotypes based on superficial race and ethnic differences will create a negative vicious cycle which will eventually lead to violence and conflict. We need to put a stop to this. We can transform each adversities to create better inter-ethnic, vis-a-vis intercultural relations across diversity through a few ways. Firstly, we need to conduct reflective inner dialogue. Through dialogue, we are able to connect the hearts and minds of each other, which leads to understanding, appreciation, and collaboration. Secondly, we need to become global citizens with wisdom, courage, and compassion to embrace diversity and being able to empathize with others. Thirdly, we need to develop our intercultural competence through cultivating our knowledge, attitude, and behavior. To cultivate attitude and behavior or skills, it is essential to use the dialogical approach to help learners draw forth the humanity inherent in all individuals. Finally, find our commonality across differences, and our commonality is none other than our humanity. Our humanity has the capacity to create good values, and it is only through nurturing this capacity inherent in all humanity we can build bridges across differences and coexist peacefully and harmoniously. Now, to end, I would like to quote again from Dr. Daisaku Ikeda in a lecture he made to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations in 1995. He said, quote, "The lessons of the 20th century was that as long as we focus solely on enhancing the structures of society and the state, while avoiding the key issue of inner change in human beings themselves, efforts for peace could even be counterproductive. Efforts to reform society must start from inner transformation of each person, or human revolution. And for that to happen, a fundamental shift in the thinking of humankind was required, from knowledge to wisdom, from uniformity to diversity, and from national sovereignty to human sovereignty." Unquote. So let us all open our minds, and open up the path to mutual respect and harmonious coexistence based on only one race, that is the human race, and in order to bring an end to this vicious cycle that has long been part of human destiny. So with that, I would like to conclude my sharing for today. So probably over back to Dr. Ilhami.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wendy. Are there any questions from the audience? Maybe you can open one or two questions.
Dr. Wendy, sorry.
Yes.
Not really a question, but I'm just wondering. You see, for example, like Japan, the empathy kind of thing, right? They started it from the what do you call
young,
that?
you mean from
Kindergarten, yes.
from they're very young, yes.
Yeah, from the very young. So you see, this is not anything new to them. It's from the upbringing. So if we have to do this, so we should start. I mean, it should be applied like that too. I do not know why. We know this from the beginning. I mean, we know it. I mean, I think Malaysians know it very well so long ago, but we have not been start doing it. Do we? I mean, yeah. I mean, we all have religions, and we are supposed to do that. I mean, we're supposed to have that. What do you think? What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there's a Malay proverb that says "Melento bulu biar dari rebungnya," right? So if you really want, to have, to develop these values, definitely, starting from young, that would be essential. That would be ideal. That would be best. But the challenge is, when we talk about starting from young, do the parents themselves? Because the first educators for the young children are their parents, right? So what are the perspective or the mindset or the frame of mind does these parents have? So if they are the people who are very stereotypical, so the chances is they're going to, perpetuate those bad stuff to their young children, right? So and definitely again, when these kids goes to school, is our school system or our teachers training equip our teachers with these things? I'm not trying to say that, I'm not trying to stereotype, and which I should not, and I'm not indicating that, I'm not saying that all schools are bad or all teachers are bad. No, that's definitely not true, right? I mean, there's a lot of wonderful teachers out there. But my only challenge, I would say, would be we haven't done enough. We haven't done enough. And again, I totally agree with you. All religion that we have in our country teaches us all these great values, all these beautiful values, But again, what is it that what kind of religious values are we sharing with our children? Are we just based on rituals? Are we just, stereotyping in the name of religion, in the name of the religious teaching, stereotyping other people? All these things are happening, and are our kids getting the right values from the teaching of our religion? So it goes back to the religious teachers, it goes back to the parents, it goes back to the adults, who are responsible. So to me, yes, short answer to your question, yes, definitely that's the most ideal way of doing it. But the stakeholders, around these children, the adults, they are not showing a good role model. Not enough, not enough of showing. These stakeholders include parents, include religious leaders, include institutions, include structures, include politicians, include teachers, include everyone, just around the kid. We are not doing enough yet, So that's why I say we have to put a stop, and each and every one of us have to be the catalyst to make that transformation. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Yes, yes, right. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wendy. I have a question for you. Okay, it's about monological. Okay, monological. I think that's one of the component of intercultural competence.
Yes.
I didn't get the second one.
Right.
Can you differentiate between the two?
Yes. So there's one monological, the other one is dialogical. So monological is just like, very the traditional way of when we go to school, teacher will just say, semua duduk, diam, dengar saya cakap. That one way of transferring knowledge, that very monological, very one way kind of telling, just one way, the teachers telling the students, I mean, in a way, I'm not saying that's totally wrong, because definitely teacher, they are subject expert, right? So there are knowledge that the students do not know, where the teacher or the lecturer will need to transfer that sort of knowledge. So that is one part of it in transferring knowledge, but that itself is not sufficient, right? So and that itself do not really have a very strong impact into the transformation of the attitude, which is effective, and the behavioral change at the end of the day. That's what we want, right? So therefore we need to have the second component of that, which is the dialogical. So the dialogical there will be a lot of inquiry based. I would say, if we use the educational term, we will say like inquiry based learning, where the teachers or the lecturers will ask a lot of questions, and allow the students to do a lot of reflections interactions, and they learn from each other. So the teachers are learning from the students, like I learn from my students, when they are narrating their stories, I also shed, a few tears when I was listening to my students. So this dialogical approach means, the teachers are learning from the students are learning from the teacher, the students are learning among themselves, even students are learning from the students themselves. And the most important component of this dialogical approach is allow reflection, allow dialogue, allow discussions, allow collaboration. So with that, it will make, it will transform, will be able to transform the knowledge acquired into effective because of the reflection, and eventually to the behavioral change, transformation that we want to see. So that is the dialogical approach.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wendy. Okay, we are running out of time. Okay, so now we are approaching the end of our session. I would like to thank so much, Dr. Wendy, for your insightful sharing and your engaging learning activities. And also, I would like to thank the audience for joining and also participating in this session. Okay, now we'd like to invite all of you to have a photo session. Could you please turn on your mic, your camera? Okay.
Hi, Ansa. Hi, Tamara, Asni. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Dr. Wendy, I just want to thank you for the wonderful session. I really appreciate, and I like your storytelling, heartwarming, touching the heart stories. Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Interesting
Thank you for the
videos.
opportunity. Thank you. Yeah.
Terima kasih Dr. Wendy.
Terima kasih Dr. Ashikin. Hi Dr.
Nice
Mala.
session.
Hi Ishan. I put my staff, Puan Farida and Dr. Mala, on the spot.
All right. Is there anyone else want to turn on their video? No? Okay, all right. Let me try to capture the first picture. All right, smile. 1, 2, 3. Right, can we have another one? Smile, 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
participation.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks
Bye.
everybody.
Selamat Hari Merdeka
so once
semua.
again, I would like to
Selamat
thank
Merdeka.
Dr. Wendy and also everybody for your time. Before we leave, please fill in the feedback form, for us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon in another
Bye.
session.
Thank you so much, Dr.